So initially I wasn't going to record this video for fairly obvious reasons. In the aftermath of what happened in Game 5, it almost serves no purpose to record a video talking about it, because it's really only going to accomplish one thing, and what that accomplishes depends on what group you find yourselves in. Either, and it's going to be just an uncut, ranting, rambling video by the way, either you're a Bruins fan, and you want me to say exactly what you know I'm going to say. You're a neutral who just wants to see me rant and rave like an absolute lunatic. Or you're in the other group, not a Boston Bruins fan by any stretch of the imagination, and you're here for the tears and the salt and to downvote the video or to leave a generic comment like, oh, how's it feel to see your team on the other side now? Which, by the way, if you're going to leave one of those comments, just get it out of the way and then leave. I don't need you here. I don't want you here because you're an idiot. Because I will mention, in terms of the Bruins' dirtiness, this is not the same team, with the exception of a few players that everybody hated for being the big bad Bruins. Milan Lucic running over Ryan Miller. That was, what, 7 years ago? 8 years ago? I mean, if you're a Habs fan, there's still some saltiness over the Pacioretty thing. If you're a Leafs fan, hey, look, the Jake DeBrusk knee happened, sure, and your team's lost to the Bruins 3 straight times. Sure, I can get why you don't want to see the Bruins win and why you might be happy about this. If you're a Canucks fan, there might still be some saltiness about 2011, which, by the way, in that final, there was some dirtiness both ways. Need I bring up Alex Burrows and Aaron Rome? Maybe you're a Blue Jackets fan who's not happy about the Marchand punch to the back of the head, although I will counter that by saying, yeah, he gets away with something like that from time to time, but then also gets reputation penalties like he did in Game 5 for poking at Binnington, which the Blues have been doing all series on every goddamn frozen puck that Tuukka Rask happens to cover, but I digress. You're in one of those three categories, right? And ultimately, I mean, I've tried to record this video 5 times since Game 5 happened. Like I said, it almost serves no purpose. I mean, yes, I'm wearing an ECHL jersey of the Maine Mariners, a league that I can actually respect. Yeah, that's right, I'm going to be that dramatic about this, I suppose. In Game 5, we witnessed the worst non-call since Brett Hull's foot was in the crease in a Stanley Cup final. No disrespect, of course, to the Lightning and Flames. That wasn't about a penalty, of course, where Brett Hull should have been. And, of course, in Game 5, there should have been a penalty. And that's a shame, because throughout the entire playoffs, I've mentioned officiating. You have to. Throughout the entire regular season, you've had to mention officiating because the NHL is a fucking mess. And everyone knows it. Now, the one thing that I have always said and will continue to say is that there is not some conspiracy against one individual team. There was no bias for a team or against a team. The officiating is just shit. And it happens to be on that given night whether or not your team is ultimately the one who suffers, because this league is a shit show that cannot get it together. Now, when it comes to the game, unfortunately, no one's talking about Tuukka Rask having a pretty strong game. No one's talking about Jordan Binnington having a nice stretch, a nice bounce back game after things were a little bit questionable. No one's talking about Ryan O'Reilly. Really, the main thing to talk about is officiating. And I'll say this, in terms of the, how salty are you? Like, there were four plays that could have been called, right? The headshot on Marcus Johansson, which is an undeniable headshot, by the way. Could have been a headshot on Krug. Even I'm of the opinion now, after seeing some different replays, he got hit in the chest and the head popped back. That's fine. The holding on Torrey Krug, which resulted in David Krejci having to make a goal line kick save at the end of the second period just to keep the Bruins in it. And then, of course, the trip on Noel Acciari. Out of those 4, let's just say even out of those 3, if we eliminate the headshot on Krug, that probably wasn't a headshot. Out of those 3, none of them were called. If you believe that's the right way to go and that the league didn't botch this, I don't know what the fuck to tell you. The fact that at least one of those 3 weren't a penalty is fucking disgusting. I'm not saying it has to taint Game 5 for you if you're a Blues fan. Be happy if you're a Blues fan. Why the hell not? You got the luck of the draw on this one. Congratulations. Of course, Blues fans will bring up, we got shafted on a hand pass. Sharks fans will say, Timo Meier was tripped before the hand pass. It's all a debatable point. People will say, Noel Acciari, he should have played to the whistle, as if... Okay, let me talk about that really quickly. We'll get back to it. Because the Marcus Johansson headshot The NHL said after the game, they acknowledged how bad the officiating was by not acknowledging it. Essentially saying, spur of the moment decisions, we trust it, we're not going to criticize officials. Only then to suspend Barbashev for Game 6, which is essentially saying, now son, you didn't do anything wrong, but you're still grounded anyway. He didn't do anything wrong, but we're still going to suspend the guy. Because this is the NHL nowadays, folks. The Barbashev headshot and the subsequent suspension. I'm kind of glad I didn't make this video until now because I at least get to talk about the Barbashev suspension. I don't give a fuck if he's suspended. I don't care. At this point, who gives a fuck? Who cares? Same thing for the Blue Jackets. Who gives a fuck if Charlie McAvoy gets suspended after the fact? It's too late. Same thing for Barbashev. It's not going to have the impact on the game that it should have. He headshotted somebody, probably should have been ejected. That's an impact. The Blues being down to 11 forwards, that's an impact. Robbie Fabry getting back into the lineup to replace him? Who gives a shit? That doesn't do anything. That's not a penalty. As in punishing the Blues for a fucking headshot that wasn't even called, but then there's a subsequent suspension for it. Oh, God. Anyway, so yeah, there's my opinions on that suspension and just how important that is, I suppose. And then again, the whole Torrey Krug having a kick save thing. And then we get to the whole Nola Chari non-call, which again is the worst non-call since Brett Hull's foot was in the crease. I've seen a lot of people say, well, the Bruins should have played to the whistle. It's not as if all 5 guys on the ice stopped playing. You fucking idiots. And I say that with the utmost kindness. Watch the play. Everyone else sticks with it. But guess what? When you have a player who's down on the ice, probably hurt because he was fouled, that's going to mean someone has to go out of position, broken play, David Perron scores. Nola Chari, here. Just right now, stand up where you are, and just jump flat onto your back. Don't really tuck your chin either. Just jump flat onto your back, and then get up and keep up with a professional athlete on skates. If you can do it, by all means, hey, you're a better man than Nola Chari, apparently. I don't really care what anybody says. Call it salt, call it whatever. I mean, Bruins got jobbed. What more is there to say? Can the Bruins still win this series? Yeah, maybe. Side note, too, I mean, the Bruins, it was a close game. Again, most games in the series have been close. The Bruins outshot them. The Bruins had more slot shots. The Blues are a little bit better on the rush. And ultimately, each team scored 1 legitimate goal. The second goal counts. But tell me that there aren't a little bit of circumstance, some circumstances around that don't justify Bruins fans being, a little bit pissed. Just a bit. And then again, the amount of Blues fans I've seen being like, yeah, that sucks. And I respect those people. I don't have an issue with Blues fans. I don't really have an issue with the Blues players. Granted, they've been playing like their head coach wants them to play because their head coach, whether or not he wants to criticize the officials this time, which we'll talk about that more in a second. By the way, I had people sending me stuff being like, oh, well, here's Mike Rupp's opinion. Here's Nick Kyprios' opinions on the hits. As if I give a fuck what a couple of fourth-line plugs as if I care what they have to say about hits. Oh, Nick Kyprios, he won a cup. Yeah, because he was carried there by better hockey players than he. Couldn't put up 20 points in a regular season, but boy, those 300 penalty minutes really helped the team. I couldn't care less what those two have to say. Let alone Berube, who was the same class of player, as it turns out, might be a half-decent head coach, or even better, a fucking Jedi master. Because the troll job, and that's my thing here. I don't blame Berube, and I've said that before. I said that after heading into Game 4. I don't blame Craig Berube for complaining about the officials. Because it's worked. It has absolutely worked, so why wouldn't you? But there has, part of me isn't upset because, my God, it just makes the NHL look so dumb. Like, you're just being played. For Berube after Game 3 to complain about the refs, and then after Game 5 be like, oh, it's not my place to complain about the refs. You're being trolled by this man to such an extreme level. And part of me was like, hey, fair play. The other part of me wants to spit in his face and then subsequently get knocked out because he'd punch my teeth down my throat. But you get the point. And I think already I've reached the point of this video where it's like, yeah, see, this is why I didn't want to talk about anything. The only difference is, unlike after Game 5, you know, as opposed to recording this video or streaming, I'm not, you know, burning my throat to death because I'm just furious. Still furious. It is Saturday morning now. I'm still pretty pissed off. I'm going to be pretty pissed off. The Bruins lose this series, I'm going to be pretty pissed off. And I don't care what anybody says as far as like, oh, well, the bigger story is the Bruins' top 6 is underperforming. Not really. The bigger story is that despite the Bruins' top 6 underperforming, this series has still been close. And who knows what happens in Game 5. Maybe the Bruins lose anyway. Maybe they never score. Maybe it ends 1-0. Maybe it ends 2-0 anyway. Maybe it ends 2-1. Maybe it goes to overtime, and then who the fuck knows. But for anybody to try and spin any other narrative out of Game 5 other than one call decided the game-winning goal of that game, I don't know what to tell you. Has the Bruins' top 6 been great? No. Have they not exactly been, you know, what's the best word? We'll go clinical finishers in this series. No, they haven't been by any stretch. Yet, they're still close. And I talked about that in every game aside from the 7-2 game, how close it has been for the other 4 games in this series. And for Game 5 to be decided like it was is, again, the biggest injustice of a non-call we've seen in 20 years. If you disagree, I don't know what to tell you, because we're just never going to agree on that, are we? And again, no disrespect to Flames and Lightning fans, although Flames fans will certainly take more offense to what happened in 04. But you get the point. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, right? Like I said, there's so many different aspects to it, like the whole Bruins dirty narrative to it. It's like, oh, well, they still have Marchand. Yeah, and again, Marchand gets reputation penalties. Talk about like, oh, well, Backes and McAvoy was suspended. You know who else was suspended for illegal hits this year? Paul Byron, Joe Thornton, Jack Eichel, Andre Palat, and Nikita Kucherov. Yeah, what goons, right? What fucking goons they were. You can't expect me as a Bruins fan to have any other opinion. You can't. And I get it, in a way. You know, I understand the lack of sympathy. If you're not a Bruins fan, it's a great fucking moment for you, and you don't have to care. But, on the flip side, you know that if this was your team, you'd be upset. And admittedly, and I said this on Twitter or Twitch the other night, and I honestly agree with it. Even if this was Montreal, I don't think I'd be laughing at their expense for just how big of a shit show this is. And you can believe me when I make that statement or not. Whether or not you believe me on that, it doesn't make a fucking difference to me. But genuinely, I mean, with the Vegas thing, you know, you still gave up 4 penalties, you know, 4 goals on the same power play. Yeah, it sucks. Still, and you had a chance in overtime to still win it. Not that the Bruins didn't have a chance. The hand pass, yeah. This is a fucking Stanley Cup final. Game 5, series tied 2-2. It's on a different stage. It's on a different scale. Don't know what to tell you. But needless to say, my care to follow the league at this point. Now, I'm not being overdramatic to be like, oh, I'm never following again. Like, you know, Friday, I didn't hear about the Jeff Skinner signing. I didn't hear about like any bit of news from the day. I didn't even hear about the suspension until I started streaming at like 11 p.m. Eastern. I just avoided all news for it all day. It's like I didn't care. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to think hockey. I don't want to talk hockey. Pretty much until Sunday, where we see what the hell happens and whether or not there is a 7th game, which obviously I hope there is. I think it should go to a 7th game at this point. And then we'll see if the NHL can manage to blow it again. But I think that's my biggest issue, is just this league. Number one, it's just such a mess. They show no signs of wanting to get it right. You know, as if, you know, multiple officiating crews being dismissed throughout this postseason isn't a warning sign of that enough. I mean, what can you say? Can't choose the sports you fall in love with, I guess. But my God. Now, in a way, fortunately, I've had, you know, the same night the Patriots got their 6th ring. Liverpool, of course, have won the Champions League within the past week. You know, so I'm still feeling relatively good as a sports fan, but for me, there is only one number one. And look, I can deal with them losing in a Stanley Cup final if they're outplayed. 2013, Chicago outplayed them. Are they being outplayed by the Blues this series? My opinion, not necessarily, because again, the games have been so close, even if the Bruins have some underperforming players. It is what it is, isn't it? The Blues trying to sell calls in Game 4, mainly Tarasenko, especially after Berube calls out the officials, and then in Game 5, again, you have at the very least 3 instances that are slam dunk penalties. The Mojo headshot, the hold on Krug, and especially the trip at the end, and they all go uncalled. And again, that's not to say that the Bruins didn't get away with stuff. I know a lot of people were pissed about the Marchand kind of undercutting in. I'm not talking about those, though. And I never said that those weren't and also shouldn't have or potentially could have been called. It's not what I'm discussing. I'm not saying that, the Bruins exclusively got screwed. But they got screwed on those calls in particular. And sure, that is the way hockey goes. Calls are missed. That's fine. But when it's multiple blatant calls in the same game, to sit there and say that anybody can't be justified in being extremely pissed off at that is just you letting your own fandom get in the way. If you can't at least admit that, then again, I don't know what to tell you. We're clearly very different people. So, I think with that, because otherwise I could just sit here and go over the same points all day long, because like I said, there's just there is so much anger and frustration over this. We're going to let it go for now. But I figured, at the very least, I would make this video, because then otherwise people can't call me out for being like, wow, you were so salty, you couldn't even make a video about it. We'll see what happens in Game 6. It's a shame my phone isn't over here, but, taking notes, talking points for what to talk about. Again, there were big moments, big performances, big saves. Great goal from O'Reilly off a pass from Zach Sanford, and who gives a shit? And again, we're talking about officiating instead. The Bruins are the team that have to suffer the calls that ends up resulting in the NHL finally fixing its shit, then so be it. At least I've had my moments. Here, we'll just flip that up a little bit. 6-time champs. At least I had my moments, and this beautiful hairline. At least I had my moment in 2011. Boy, that is just not where it was. Yep. Yeah, there we go. At least I had my moment in 2011 as a Bruins fan. That can't be taken away from me. Yeah, well, they fucking got there because of cheap shots. Shut up. Oh, yeah, people cheap shotted in 2011. Yeah, and enforcers were still a thing. The game's changed in the past 8 years. Don't know if you've noticed. Point being, we'll see what happens in Game 6. Won't we? Won't we? Again, if you're a Blues fan, be happy. I know I would be. You can, hey, and if you're the type of Blues fan that isn't biased enough that you can admit the absurdity of the moment, then I commend you and we can be best friends. If you're a Blues fan who's like, whatever, the Bruins should have been better, then you're a fucking idiot and I don't have time for you anyway. And again, for the Bruins, we'll see how Chara plays. I didn't think he was miserable with the broken jaw and all. That's a moment that's lost. I'm obviously hoping the better version of the Bruins show up. Whether or not they run 6 defensemen or 7, will Backus sit again? All I know is, of course, obviously that top 6 needs to have a great game on Saturday or this is probably over. But it has been a very close series with the exception of one game. I hope Game 6 in a way. Obviously, I'm just hoping for the outcome to not be a Blues blowout victory, right? But the NHL is just a shit show, isn't it? It's really the only way to put it. The NHL is just a shit show. It feels like the entire season was building up to this point. So many bad calls, the rules with the replays and all this shit, and it all builds up to one moment. Game 5, no whistle when Noel Acciari gets fucking dumped onto his head. I will see you all probably Monday for another one of these style videos. I still feel like this webcam is not exactly where I was aiming it, but you know what? That's a little bit better. It's about the same, I think, as it was. I don't fucking know. We'll see what happens. Like I said, I think more, less so than being a Bruins fan. I think as a hockey fan, it's like, just let it go 7. Just let it go 7. Erase the bullshit of Game 5. Please. Please. Again, I'm not... It's tough because in any other loss, officiating wasn't the reason the Bruins lost. Game 5, the winning goal was flat out decided because of officiating. So, I think we're good here, right? If there are any other points that I missed, I'll bring it up in the comments. Look forward to the dislike bar on this one because, again, despite the fact that, and I will flat out say this on my own, despite the fact that I feel like this is a very measured take, there'll still be people like, no, you're salty. That's it. So, looking forward to seeing the comments from you guys. God, the NHL sucks.